For Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello,
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and true. Come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Kristen Slevin, you are one of the Nerds for Yang original audience members and certainly our most supportive official channel member. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you for all the support you've done for the channel. It's helped us do a lot of the Spanish language captions and voiceovers. And then recently I just actually started doing a bit of advertising for the channel to kind of get more people aware of our content. So thank you for all that support. But before we get into any more details about Nerds for Humanity, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience for those who are not as familiar with you as I am?
Well, I never thought that I would be here actually talking to you. I like to stay behind the scenes. I'm a member of the Long Island Yang Gang, although by far not a real active member. I felt like I wanted to help and do more for the Andrew Yang campaign. However, being strapped to a job that is 8 hours plus a couple of hours of commuting, could be longer depending on how your day unwinds, I didn't have the time to really dedicate to it. So when I first saw Nerds for Yang and I started following a couple of your shows, I said, I wish I had the time to do what Tom's doing. So since I can't put the time in, let me show some support and become a member for the show. So that sort of led me here.
And then before you started supporting the show, you were also pretty active in Long Island with the Yang Gang movement over there, right?
Yeah, like we are totally grassroots over in Long Island. The campaign, I want to say that the campaign had such a polished side to it for the front-facing side that when I decided to go to a tabling event, I had no idea that it was being fully sponsored by volunteers. That the campaign had not extended out to Long Island, New York. And I was blown away to meet a volunteer named Alison Wang, who basically single-handedly booked all these street fairs throughout Long Island, paid for it out of her own pocket, and was working these street fairs every Saturday and Sunday to expose people to Andrew Yang. So that was just something that I found unbelievable in such an anti-political time when people are so apathetic. You find somebody that was so moved that they're putting in their time and putting in their money. And I said to her, I'm like, so how many people come to these with you? And she's like, well, if I'm lucky, I get 1 or 2 people. Maybe it's a big weekend and I'll get 10 people to come and volunteer with her. Yeah. And I was like, man, so even if I can only give a couple of hours every now and then, that's better than her being here alone.
It is pretty incredible how the movement online versus the actual sort of troops on the ground that the Yang 2020 campaign had was there was quite a mismatch in that online it felt like, whoa, there's this like massive tidal wave of Yang Gang. But I agree with you in some interactions with the official campaign. I was like, oh yeah, this is like a startup, they're definitely, moving fast, and credit to them for going as far as they did. But it was not like, the Hillary 2016 campaign where, they had been putting that thing together for like 10 years or something like that.
Like, yeah, I totally thought that maybe Andrew Yang was sitting in the wings for some time. Maybe he had a friend who was very politically active, so that when he stepped into this, he basically was just a face we didn't know. And then it turned out that, no, he was really authentic and really just jumping into it for the first time. So then you get that feeling even more inside like, okay, this guy is hanging himself out there to dry in the political Shark Tank. Whatever we can do to back him up and support him, we should do.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't one of these guys that positioned himself as an outsider, but really had been plotting for, years and years, and had like all this like support in the like waiting in the wings. He really was a disruptive candidate, and I guess that's why in some ways a lot of us who were putting in our time felt even more motivated, because we're like, well, if no one's going to do it, like, then who, so it sounds like you started volunteering some time. And what industry, what can you tell us a little bit about, like your background or your day job, or
my day job right now is I am a strategic sourcing manager for a packaging company. So my day in, day out is finding suppliers around the world to manufacture different things that my customers might be wanting. And from one day it could be a water bottle, the next day it could be customized tape. It's just basically anything that a customer could possibly want. So it's an interesting, fun gig.
Has it been affected by the Corona stuff, or is it even more busy or less busy?
Absolutely.
Like, what's it like?
The whole entire supply chain is always affected by whatever's happening in the world. And the best way that I can explain what happened with the coronavirus is that it was like getting a natural disaster like an earthquake or a volcano erupting or something like that when it hit China. And all of a sudden we had suppliers in Wuhan who, we heard about it and we knew that Chinese New Year was extended and that there could be delays. But then they started sending us pictures of their facilities being cleaned by people in full hazmat suits. And I remember saying to some of the people that I work with, I'm like, okay, this is a little bit weird. Like, we understand that people are getting sick, but why are they spraying things down? And why is everybody working in this gear? So, and they're still recovering. They're still figuring it out.
When did you see those pictures? How early was that?
Excuse me, once. I have a cat that's wandering around here.
I thought you were going to pull a Marco Rubio where you reach for the water bottle.
No, I have someone who I think is a little bit annoyed that he's not getting
Mr. Bigglesworth. Yeah, that's a good-looking cat, though.
Yeah, Padme. So we got the photos probably end of January.
Okay. And now are you seeing like that supply chain free up a little bit? Is it going back to normal, or is it getting
going
worse?
back to normal, but because of the demand for the medical supplies,
right,
things are getting shifted around. So where, if you thought of it in terms of a typhoon, maybe the shipping and the freight and the ports would get backed up a little bit and containers would be rolled or knocked off of their slot to get onto a certain ship. So you're seeing things like that right now. So even though they say it's going to ship on such and such a date, it might be an additional week or 2 weeks. You don't know because everything's changing so quickly.
Yeah. So I'm guessing in some ways that's a good sign for the medical supplies, because we're kind of giving those all the priority slots. Does that mean we should expect boats full of ventilators and masks?
I don't have visibility on that, and I wouldn't. It's hard to say right now because I just don't feel like we're getting a lot of reliable information coming from that region. I feel like we're getting a lot of what they want us to hear.
Oh, and so they're tending to say like, oh, everything's fine.
Everything's fine. And then all of a sudden things aren't coming in time. And then we hear something new on the news. But our suppliers have been great. Like, I don't know if you have any exposure to working with suppliers from China, but they work 24/7. Yeah. And we're on a totally different cycle than them. We're opposite sides of the world, but 24/7, they're super responsive. Their people work from home in addition to working at the factory. And, I think that our suppliers are very honest with what they know, but they're on a sort of limited information stream themselves.
Yeah, I remember watching. Did you see this Netflix documentary, American Factory?
I haven't seen it yet. A lot of people are saying to watch it.
Well, yeah, because the Chinese management, they visit the sister factory in the US. I mean, sorry, in China. So basically, this Chinese company bought an old GM, I think, factory, and then tried to take it over, and did take it over. And they were just showing sort of how the management of the Chinese company were adjusting to kind of the American workday. And they had this one point where they were in a management meeting, and they're like, well, how come they're not willing to work 7 days a week? They're talking about the American workday. And it's like, yeah, that's I don't think anybody wants to go back to those days. But then when they went to China, you're right. I mean, there was this worker who was saying that she only gets to go see her family like a few times a year, and they just live in the factory dorms or whatever. So I have no doubt that they're busting their chops trying to kind of get throughput back out. Hopefully there can be some help with all the medical supplies that the world seems to need now. Let's talk a little bit about your work with the Yang Gang. Obviously, things changed after New Hampshire. How did you, that
was pretty devastating. I think I immediately cried watching it happen online, because I think everybody had so much optimism, even coming out of Iowa, and then seeing what a debacle Iowa was. It was almost like, okay, well, he's got this. This is like,
Iowa's too crazy. Yeah.
New Hampshire's small. They're open to somebody that's more independent. They're free thinkers.
Yes.
And being in a close relation, Long Island to New Hampshire, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a really good spot for him. And then to see him come out, and then to say that he was suspending, what prompted me to reach out to you, which now it seems like it was eons ago, since the world has gone, into this totally new track. As someone who was a Republican and swapped to be a Yangocrat, I love the fact that everybody came to the Yang campaign from all these different walks of life, and it was totally a judgment-free zone. We're here, we're focused on our goal, we're moving forward, and the humanity first message was something that we really needed. Then after our fearless leader suspended, I watched Yang Gang, like, some of them were just imploding on each other. All of a sudden, people sort of took off their Yang Gang gear, and they were all of a sudden Bernie or Biden or Warren, and it was overwhelming. And at that time, while people are scrambling to figure out where they're going to go next, and waiting sort of in the abyss, I felt like, this is a great time to reach out to people who have a lot of passion, but maybe didn't have a lot of time, have a lot of ideas, and see, hey, what are you going to do? Like, even for Nerds for Yang, Nerds for Humanity, I'm like, what's Tom going to do? Like, Tom can't hang it up. He's got a voice, he's got a platform now, he's got something that's just in the seed stage. So it's really important for me to see that people see that they have something to grow now, that we didn't get to the harvest yet, and that this was just the very beginning of seed planting.
Absolutely. I'd love to talk to you, because you have a little bit of experience setting up or being involved with nonprofits and organizations like that. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what people can, keep in mind, and also hear your thoughts on the Humanity Forward stuff. Before we get into that, I do think I did notice as well the post New Hampshire kind of Yang Gang. There was tension. you know?
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was like, a family coming apart.
Yeah.
Because
It reminded me of sometimes you have those funerals where people just start like really turning on each other.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it was so surprising because we all got along so well the day before New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like I remember on Twitter, people are like, oh, Tom's selling out, he's so anti-Biden or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, like I get we were always a diverse group, but maybe Yang was this unique connector that without him actively campaigning, we became this sort of balkanized community. I think it's gotten better now, but it certainly had some rough spots.
Yeah, I think the cream sort of rose to the top in this situation. And, now it really is who is, I guess you would say, true Yang Gang and holding on and, capturing some of the platform pieces and wanting to push that forward. And, but it was definitely weird. Weird is the best way that I can say it.
So, but while we're on that topic, like, are you excited about the Biden sort of presumed nomination, or are you thinking, well, as a former Republican, maybe tempted to go back to the GOP or third party? Where's your head at?
My head is at, as long as people vote, I'm happy that they're part of the system and that they're voting. I myself did not vote during the Trump-Hillary campaign. I was one of those people that I couldn't figure out who to pull the lever for. And so I just sat it out and,
well, thanks a lot, Kristen.
But then you get this false sense of herd, right? The herd mentality. I'm in New York. We're going blue. Whether or not I pull the lever or not, basically, we're going blue. But my hometown of Smithtown, New York, gave Trump the biggest margin in New York. So as far as New York's concerned, I'm like in Trumpville here.
Yeah. I heard that Long Island is like a very strong, it's like Trump country. Like he goes there and he gets energized. Why do you think what's the rationale for the strong Trump support in Long Island?
I think that Trump coming from New York in the first place, and then having all the glitz and glamour of The Apprentice and getting people to really have a fandom for him after that, then you think that the government is so stuck, nobody can get anything done. Yeah. So what could one person that's an outsider that we push in there, what could he possibly do? We had no idea he was going to do whatever he wants to do and then worry about it later. But I think that was really the mentality. He's an everyday person. He can say he's a millionaire or whatever else, but he's basically an everyday person. He talks to people like a guy at the bar. Yeah. He wasn't a polished politician. He said everything that people thought about these politicians on the stage. And I don't think a lot of people thought it was going to go so that there would be so much change is the best way that I can put it. That we went right off the rails.
Like in terms of legislation, I feel like to some extent the Congress and Senate has kept him, kind of a little bit in check. But in terms of how he communicates and the culture, as an example, I'd be curious what your thoughts are. There's a little bit of scuttlebutt now about, talking about Corona or COVID as, as the Chinese virus.
Chinese virus. Yeah, of course.
And I'm curious, like right now, I'm still an expat in Europe and haven't, experienced much, discrimination that I can tell. Have you noticed anything in Long Island or?
I haven't noticed anything out here that I hate to say is any different than the norm.
Right.
So we still do have definite racial tensions everywhere. There are people that, it's still like an Archie Bunker kind of day where certain things that you say, even though those words carry certain meanings and can incite certain feelings out of different groups, we're not very liberated, enlightened. So when I hear people getting very upset about these things, I can totally understand that there's no reason why, Asians should be singled out like this. But I feel like it's kind of a moot point to change the focus to how people are talking about it in this time. Great for a postmortem, but right now we have much bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. So what's your take on how we're dealing with this crisis now as a country, and how has it affected you? Like, are you working from home and everything, or?
Yeah, I'm working from home. My husband is working from home. My husband's office closed a week or so ago because somebody in the office tested positive. He's in a big office with like 3 floors, hundreds of employees in the building, not just his company. My son's daycare closed because they had a parent who tested positive. So my job in turn said, you stay home. But now that Cuomo has, closed down just about everything, the majority of my company is work from home. We have some essential staff in the office because we are in the supply chain. Yeah.
What's your take on Cuomo? He's been getting a lot of press time. Do you feel like he's doing a good job, bad job? What are your thoughts?
He's doing an excellent job. I was never a Cuomo fan. Right up until right before this broke down. But after seeing Trump say at his campaign rally that it was a hoax, and, that really, drew some big lines for me. And now seeing, I'm in this sort of panicked mode most of the time, anxiety ridden, saying to myself, like, okay, is Cuomo going to be on at 11? I'm expecting him on at 11. And then he's on at 11. It's like, okay, he's here to calm the masses.
Yeah.
It's a frightening time.
Yeah. I when I've heard him speak, he seems like he's very determined. He has a sense of urgency. And I love how he seems to have comfort with like facts and numbers in a way that when I watch the Trump press conferences, it's very much like a show, like it's very much like trying to convince us that everything's fine and that he's in control. But I think in times like this, I kind of prefer Cuomo saying like, this is a serious thing. We're trying everything we can to get ventilators. We don't have enough. Here's what we're doing. Like, I'd rather have that than just say like, oh, don't worry, you can take malaria pills and it'll work. Because,
well, I've actually put on some social media posts that I hope we go to a brokered convention and they just figure out how to throw Cuomo in.
I've seen
my Hail Mary pass.
I've seen him show up now in some of the election betting odds as a long shot, but who knows, right?
Yeah,
he's definitely, he comes from very capable political stock, and I'm sure he's a great speaker. And well, let's shift gears a little bit, Kristen, and talk about going forward. Like, what do you think of Humanity Forward? What do you think of the Yang Gang volunteers? Sort of how folks are spending their time, any advice? And how are you thinking about that?
So I was fortunate enough to go to The View when Andrew Yang went to The View and made his announcement, which was a phenomenal experience. Everybody that was there, it was the sense of like closure and new beginning. So it was a great event. And people were very excited about the Humanity Forward. How can we dig in? See, the issue with the Yang Gang is I feel the people that I've met, the vast majority of them are overachievers or like all in type of people. Like they
Mhm.
have committed, they are so totally in, and it's like, okay, now what do you do with all this pent up energy?
Yeah.
So it's great that Humanity Forward came out. Now the question to me is, besides donating, how quickly are they going to be able to make places for people to latch on and feel like they're a part of the movement?
Yeah.
Which is
That's
kind
a
of on the
great
back
point.
burner now, you know?
Yeah. I, for some reason, I was thinking that when Humanity Forward was announced, that there would be even more meat on the bones in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, okay, we're going to have 3 key initiatives, and we are now, yes, raising money, but we're also staffing up an organization. We're going to have our office, whatever, in Brooklyn or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking for people to help with canvassing for local candidates, and really go all in.
Yeah.
And I wonder, was that maybe hoped for, but because of the COVID stuff, it threw a wrench in the whole
Yeah,
plan?
I think COVID right now and the pandemic has thrown everything we know it into an alternate universe, and we're just going with it. But
Hmm.
Humanity Forward, yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to have legs and life all of its own, or is it really just like a green room for 2024?
Right.
So I am not sure how I feel about that yet. You know, I'm totally behind him no matter what, but you know, that's kind of like what I'm looking for is the direction, like where can I be a part of this in a more meaningful way.
Yeah. And if do you have a preference as to whether or not it were a pure staging ground for 2024 versus a full-on nonprofit focused on, let's say, basic income advocacy?
Yeah,
would you
I would
prefer?
rather see it the latter. I would rather
Yeah.
see it be a standalone, especially being someone that's flipped parties.
Mm,
I don't want it to feel like it's totally blue. I want it to
yeah.
be open, that, you know, whoever wants to join this movement, and then in those places that you can find common ground, then when you come across election season, it's easier to move certain people
Mhm,
over when they
mhm.
already have a relationship with you. But if it's totally blue, I think it's going to make some people back off and not be so eager to jump in.
What's your take on whether or not people should create their own nonprofit or initiatives or organizations versus hop on to the Humanity Forward kind of bus? Because presumably there's going to be infrastructure, coordination, kind of
Mhm.
legitimacy that you get instantly with Humanity Forward versus a smaller
I
thing.
Yeah, I would love to see Humanity Forward be completely nonpartisan. Now, not
Hmm.
bipartisan, but nonpartisan, like organizations, the NAACP, League of Women Voters, those are nonpartisan groups. So where a bipartisan group like the New York State Board of Elections favors the two major parties and
Hmm.
has all the rules and everything is baked in to just support those two major parties. So I'd like to see Humanity Forward be a beacon, an example of a nonpartisan group where you can do good things and move policies forward and have your select platforms. But I do feel like someone like me that doesn't have a lot of time to invest into a national organization or a big startup like that, I'm very pro do it in your own backyard. Find
Hmm.
people that are close to you that you can meet in, you know, face to face at least twice a year, have a biannual meeting, and start about thinking about your own organization locally like that. And then as you develop your own organization, you can think about, well, who are my sister or my brother organizations, and start to sort of link up like a chain,
Hmm.
rather than everybody trying to reinvent the wheel across the United States, across the world. You know, I think that's why I've offered some advice to some of the groups that are starting. Um, but when they're like, we want you on the call and we want you to get involved, and I'm like, oh, I don't have the time to invest in that. Like, that's not for me. Um, I need to find something that's closer to home and build it from the ground up.
Yeah. So when you've excuse me, when you've talked to these organizations that are starting to form and they want to get your time, what is it that you see them struggling the most to figure out? Like what are some, like, don't do
Yeah.
the list of to do's and not to do's when thinking about forming, a local
Right.
organization?
Absolutely. Keep it simple, Simon. Keep it real simple. You want to always have everything that you do with the intention that there's only going to be one or two of you that's going to be holding the boat together, and that you need to have everything written at a level that, a third or a fourth grader could easily understand. People get so bogged down with the details. You want to keep it. The very first thing, a la Jerry Maguire, is to have that mission statement. So find out what your mission statement is. Make it something that lasts the test of time, that if you achieve that goal, where does your organization go after that? So that's a very important thing. You might spend months hashing that out with your other volunteers and startup founding members, but it's so important to get that. And then once you get that, it's really, really simple. It's like baking a cake. Basically, you do a constitution, you do a bylaws, you can get templates for this online, you fill in the blanks, and then you decide, do I want to be a corporation? Do I just want to keep it real informal? If I want to be a corporation, do I want to become a nonprofit? It's made for people to be able to do these things. So it's not something you have to hire an accountant for or an attorney for. It's something that if you have a group of people together or just a single person who's willing to do the work, you can totally do it.
Yeah, well, one of the things that a lot of people give advice to entrepreneurs is to incorporate as soon as possible because of liability for the founder. And I was curious, is that similar for nonprofits? Like, I could see some people saying, like, well, why do I even need to do bylaws and constitutions and fill out all those forms? Like, we're just going to be a bunch of volunteers and we'll do stuff together. What's your take on that?
It's a very personal decision. And I don't have the whole breadth of what it's like to be a nonprofit everywhere. My experience is in New York, registering for the federal nonprofit status. But so there was a civic association in my neighborhood that was started sometime in the 60s or 70s. And as the years went on, they had incorporated, but they never got their federal tax exemption status. So they never became an official nonprofit. They had a piece of property that was willed to them from somebody in the neighborhood. And that piece of property, since they didn't have the nonprofit status, had taxes on it, property taxes, and they didn't have enough money to cover it. So now people are paying out of their pocket for it. So that's how I first became involved, is that myself and some other volunteers were like, well, this is crazy. Why aren't you a nonprofit? And the response we got was, it costs money to hire an attorney and to hire an accountant, and we don't have the money to do that. So, it took a group of people going through the application to do it. And it's kind of like doing your own taxes. Yeah. You go through the application, you send it in, the government sent back, you did this, this, and this wrong. We corrected it, and then voila, we had it.
Yeah. How long did it take from start to getting to voila?
I would say that it took a good year. It took a good year, and only because everybody's only doing it on their spare time outside of their job. Let me look at it at night. And then for it to make its way through maybe 12 board members who wanted to see it, that's the actual mailing time and coming back and forth, maybe 4 months.
Yeah, got it. So it's probably a lot of waiting as well after you fill out the forms. Yeah. So what's your plan going forward? Like, where are you going to be spending your limited time and resources to kind of stay involved with the movement in general?
Right now, I'm kind of scavenging around and finding the people who I think are going to be important resources in the future for me. So ultimately, what I would like to see is an organization that helps to show people who aren't party affiliated or haven't been in the political system how to jump in and get into a primary, get on the ballot. Ballot access is my primary goal. A few years back, I had run for town supervisor in my local town, not backed by a political party, so totally on an outside track. And it was a crazy learning experience, a lot of hurdles. And when we were all done with it, we had 8% of the vote. And I feel committed to those people that volunteered on my campaign to keep that door open. And seeing people in the Yang gang, now a lot of people are running.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, people really need to have an avenue to go and look if they want to understand how to get on the ballot. So that's kind of where I'm hoping to see maybe a year or two down the road, to have a place where people can go where they're really passionate and enthusiastic and get some nonpartisan advice on how to run.
What was your experience like running? I mean, first of all, congratulations on getting 8% for your first time out there.
Thank you.
What was that like? Like, was that like an all-consuming thing for a long time, or?
Yes, I was running. My husband and I were running a small business in town. We ran a chocolate shop. We saw a town where small businesses were failing, and we had a lot of people that were complaining that the government didn't care. So once you start to talk to different people in town about the issues, and you're like, you know, you would be great to run, then eventually they turn to you and they're like, you know, you would be good to run. So I sort of had to put my money where my mouth was and actually run to show people that you could run. I didn't understand anything about campaign finance. I couldn't get an accountant locally to do it for me because, you know, people are sort of tied into political parties, and being an outsider, nobody wanted to run my books. So I kept a campaign of under $1,000 budget. And yeah, it was wild. It was a great time.
Would you do it again?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Why not? What was the worst part about it?
You have to be ready for the trolls. Not just the trolls that you're going to see online, but the trolls that are going to show up when you're speaking at things, when you're at a debate, when you're just walking on the street trying to shake people's hands. It makes it so bad that I cannot believe that anyone runs for public office that has a salary under $150,000, because you're working 24/7 once you're elected. And then you have all these people who are at you because they feel that they're entitled to have all of your time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's that is something I often feel terrible about, in that America has a lot of great people, but the return on investment, like the reward for all of the stuff you have to go through, is not super attractive. And, yeah.
This is, for example, in my local town, your council people make, I think they just gave themselves a raise, and I think it's somewhere around $75,000 a year that they're getting. But still, if I'm a private worker and I'm making that or more, and I go into the government and I get elected for 4 years, there is no guarantee that I'm getting elected the 4 years after that. And then I lose my place in the private sector for 4 years. Like, who's going to do that? So you start.
So those council jobs are full time?
Yes.
Oh, so you got to do it
where I am.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so. Yeah. To your point, let's say you're doing well. You're gonna take a pretty material pay cut, and then you're gonna get a lot of people just like talking smack about you when you're like trying to buy your groceries.
Yes, exactly.
And then if they don't,
catching you on the phone,
right? And if they don't reelect you, then you just took like a 4-year leave from your regular job, and they already backfilled you.
Yes,
and maybe
absolutely.
a new role's not available, and they're like, well, I don't even know if your experience at the council is relevant because we need people who know logistics.
Yeah. So we get a lot of people who are caught between jobs, or it's just well.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. And then if anybody proposed, although I think Yang did propose compensating the president's office more, because like my wife is Singaporean, and they pay their ministers there like top. They actually benchmark it to what like Fortune 500 like executives make.
That's what I think it should be.
Yeah,
because then you give people a reason to really be there. It's enticing. It makes them less vulnerable to being
bribed.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, people, if you're in Singapore and like you meet the minister of finance, it's the equivalent of meeting like a partner at Goldman. Like it's that well regarded. Whereas now, if you meet someone that works in the Treasury Department, you're like, oh, what happened to you?
Right.
We couldn't make it on Wall Street. So yeah, it's a different world. So what are your any other thoughts that you want to share or discuss before we take some audience questions, Kristen?
Oh, audience question.
Yeah.
My number one thing is that I'm hoping by being here that I can encourage other people to become members of this channel. That's really important to me. I love what you do, Tom. I love the people you have on. On a personal note, I'm hoping that you don't officially endorse anyone, because in the future, seeing that Nerds for Humanity will go on perpetually, you might come to a situation where you have a primary where you have 2 Yang Gang people or 2 pro-UBI people. So I would love for this to be a place where people can come and not get that official, like, well, we only support this guy and we're only pushing him. Like, for example, Mike from Kentucky. I love Mike from Kentucky. And I cannot believe that I keep on getting these emails from the DNC telling me to donate to Amy. Like, what is that? I never once donated to anything over there. And they're spamming me on this. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's another interesting thing I've been hearing. I was obviously I love Mike as well, and I was talking to Sammy over in where was he? Like northern part of Brooklyn or something, and Sammy Ravello, and he was like, "Yeah, well, I'm running in the Democratic primary. In order to even get the voter list, I have to pay the DNC $12,000." And it's like, what?
And then I found out, this is a crazy thing. I found out that the list that everybody's getting access to, literally when I was a candidate in New York, in New York State, I get access to that raw database. It's just a big Excel file.
Yeah.
And then the DNC is essentially reselling what is available to the candidate on their own. It's a really
very
big
strange.
racket.
It's very strange. Like I was looking at, I was doing some volunteer spreadsheet work for a candidate last weekend, and the person was like, "Oh, I paid and I got the data," and I said, "Oh, this is gonna be amazing." And I was like, "Where are there other columns here? Like, where's the rest of the data?"
Right.
And they're like, "No, it's got the name and the age and the precinct and whether they voted or not," and that's helpful. But I was thinking it was going to be this treasure trove.
Oh, like analytics.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. So number one, the data isn't that good, and then number two, like, why charge 12,000 for it then? Like, and what? It's just so unfortunate. So I appreciate you, calling out, the membership of this channel. But what I'm going to start doing is, when we were Nerds for Yang and the campaign was still active, most of the money was going to our Spanish dubbing vendor. And I actually will be publishing some new Evelyn Yang videos in Spanish probably next week. The first run, like the
Yeah.
translation quality, we had some issues, so they had to redo it.
Mhm.
But now with the member support, I'm actually going to start doing some promotion of the channel with paid ads to try and grow our audience. Because
That's awesome.
yeah, my hope is that if we get more candidates to come on and they're willing to keep it real and just have like a casual conversation, but also like talk, go deeper than like the 2-3 minute
Mhm.
kind of typical interview, everybody wins. So yeah, if you
Yeah.
guys are watching and you want to support the channel, it's
Because
tinyurl.com/join-NFH.
Part of the reason too that I feel committed to being a member, not that this is a telethon, but that I feel committed to being a member is because I don't have the time to vet every issue, every candidate. So I really am looking at you as my authority, as my Dan Rather, to be really getting to the nuts and bolts of these people. And it is getting to the point where you are speaking with so many people that I almost feel like, well, if they didn't make it onto Nerds for Humanity, like, I'm sorry, that's just how I feel. That's how I feel about,
Yeah, I mean, my wife was just saying the other day, she was like, why are all these people coming on your show? And I was like, well, they want an audience. We have a little bit of an audience now. And I think the conversations we've had, they tend to be, people reveal themselves if you give them enough time.
Yeah.
And it's been fun. And so actually, I think in the next few weeks, I'm going to have our first Republican candidate. So he's running for Senate in Montana. And so, yeah, I take your point that we don't want to be just sort of like a Homer channel where it's like you have to be, with us or you're against us kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'd rather just have it so that we can have like a good conversation and just get to know people, and then let the viewers decide what they want to do. The guy, the Republican, his name's Dan Larson. He's running in Montana. I think he's a clerk at a hardware store, but he's Yang Gang, so that's how he knew about us.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so we should be cool, and we'll keep trying to get more people on. We have like 9 guests lined up for the next couple of months, which is even why when you and I were scheduling time, since I only shoot on the weekends because of my day job, I can only do so many each week kind of thing. Cool. All right.
Awesome.
Well, why don't we now shift gears and take some audience questions? So if anybody out there has a question for Kristen or myself, go ahead and put it in a chat. We'll try and hit them. And then I think we'll wrap up this stream. And then maybe in 10 or 20 minutes, I'm going to do a new stream all about COVID data analysis. I got my hands on some more data. And I was showing my boys, and they were saying, "Oh, Dad, this is the best data I've seen in a long time." So we're that warmed my heart. I was like, "That's right, son. This is some great data." All right, let's see if we have any questions. I guess one question I have for you, Kristen, while we wait for some more to roll in, is what's your take on Yang endorsing Biden and how he's kind of pivoting humanity forward to a COVID relief kind of focus? What's your take?
I think it's fantastic that he's donated the money. I think he already donated, right? In the Bronx.
Yeah, I think they've lined up like $1 million.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's $1 million, over so many people.
Yeah.
And just the fact that he's able to turn that around so quickly, that he's able to be that nimble, is fantastic and really draws a nice contrast against how slow our government is to act.
Yeah, it is impressive. I mean, I guess that's one of the benefits of not having to deal with Congress and everything. That's it's amazing. The folks in DC are kind of not moving in wartime kind of speed, but also B, I also find like insufficiently talking or proposing actions around supply of ICU beds and ICU staff and ventilators and temporary hospitals.
It's very, they just weren't prepared. And I think that they just looked the other way on this. And I do think that some people did try to politicize this one way or the other way. And now here it is. And hopefully the more people that are able to just worry about taking care of the American people, the better off we'll be. I love seeing AOC and Mitt Romney and that meme in the math hats. that was perfect. All of a sudden, everything that Andrew Yang said about UBI is right here. What he predicted to take 10 years, 10 weeks, like 10 weeks, our downtowns are going to be decimated. So many people are laid off. Automation is going to just step right in. How many of these companies are going to really hire everybody back like that?
Yeah. That's a good point. When we do start to, kind of reorient back to more normalcy, it will be very convenient to very slowly rehire, and might as well. I mean, if you're a shareholder, you would be tempted to take advantage of the transition to just say, well, we might as well accelerate the automation.
But on the other hand, I totally agree with you, but a very bright light that I see are all of the artists and musicians taking to social media, sharing their craft. I think I saw Anthony Hopkins with his cat playing piano. I saw Steve Martin on the banjo, just unbelievable. And for these people to really highlight their value to humanity, that Andrew Yang was constantly saying that unfortunately, they're valued at zero, most of them. I really hope that this really shifts a lot of things for a lot of people.
I agree. It's especially during these tough times where it's very easy to, I have like a family WhatsApp group, and one of my brothers is just constantly sending these, very like morbid headlines. And I get it. Is
this the one that's totally stocked in his apartment with like everything?
That's the one. I think I saw him say hi in the chat too. He might even be watching us right now.
I loved watching him and all of his stuff, especially because he's your brother. That was like great.
We are very different. We have the same parents, but that's pretty much it.
He's like all these containers of rubbing alcohol, and I'm like, I can't find him anywhere. Look, he's got them all right there.
Yep, good old Peter. He's character. Yeah. So, but one of the things that I've been doing today was I was on YouTube, and there's these artists, these acapella singers that will record themselves like in multiple shots, and then like they do their own harmonization and they do their own.
You mean like Queen? Queen, Freddie Mercury, when they first started out, because they didn't have the electronics like we do today, they did all of their singing by running like reel-to-reel recordings and replaying them and singing over them. Yes.
So I guess you're right. It is like Queen. So maybe what's old is new again.
Yeah.
So I discovered this artist, and she is incredible. She was singing like you remember the Cranberries back in like, the 90s? Yeah, of course,
Zombie. Yeah, what a very appropriate song.
All right, while we're talking, I will just do a very brief artistic diversion for a minute, but check this out. This is pretty incredible. So cool. So anyway, that's Julia Westland, if anybody wants to check her out on YouTube.
I love it.
But when you're working from home and you can't go outside on the weekends, because we're locked down in Zurich right now,
Yeah.
You know, you're like, hey boys, this is Acapella. But yeah, all right. Now I have a question here from Chris Chan, who's also a member of the Nerds for Humanity channel.
Hi, Chris Chan.
So Chris wants to know, do you think it's useful to have a body person next to you to control the trolls when you're mixing with the constituents?
Yes, I absolutely think that no candidate should be by themselves, even on the local level. Even, you know, even your mayor, your small, my town is only, I think around 100,000 voters, but it's just people are fanatics, and you definitely should never be there alone. I also disagreed with people gathering signatures and collecting petitions by themselves. People think that I'm too, you know, that I'm too neurotic about it, that I'm worrying about something that I shouldn't, but I feel like you always need a buddy. It's just, you know, it's even, I guess I'm old fashioned because I'm like, even if you're out at night, you really shouldn't be by yourself at night anywhere. But definitely don't, if you don't have a friend to go to you with these things, that would probably be the only time when I would encourage someone to hold off on running. You need to have a little bit of an entourage first, just for safety.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, you can't just on your own say, well, I'll do it all myself, because if that means you have to show up and knock on doors and, you know, the sun's setting and you're by yourself. I mean, part of the challenge, I suppose, is that these voters are pretty fired up about stuff, and they might see you as the manifestation of all of their frustration with, you know, government or policies or whatever, and maybe not be well mentally. And if you're on your own, that could end badly. Yeah, for sure.
You know, just running on the local level, I heard so many people's stories about how the government, be it the government right here or the national government or the state government, has done something terrible to them. And you want to be empathetic. You have to hopefully steer them to let them know what your position that you're running for covers, where you actually have a voice. And sometimes as you start to rise up in the polls and you start to get recognized by the press, people want to co-opt your voice. You know, they just want to say, well, I want you to speak about this certain thing next time that you're out because I've been with you since before anybody knew about you.
Yeah, they feel like they own a little piece of you in a way.
Yes.
Yeah. Rock wants to know, do you see yourself getting involved in helping who the Dem nominee winds up being? Sorry that you can't run yourself, and he doesn't blame you. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. If I feel that there's someone out there, like if I had the bandwidth to be there with Mike in Kentucky, I would totally be there with Mike in Kentucky because I believe in what he's doing. There's just that sort of in your gut feeling. And if I find another candidate like that, you know, then yeah, it doesn't matter what party they're in. Let me know that we have some common initiatives that we want to accomplish, and you know, I'll throw myself behind anybody that's willing to get up there, you know, because they're going to need people behind them to help them when they're pushed over, because they totally will be.
So, but that also sounds like you're not sold on the gentleman that rides the Acapella train to DC on a regular basis by the name of Joe. What's your take on him?
I think I was really disappointed that he said that he was making his VP a woman. It really, really bothered me. I'm very anti-identity politics. I don't want to hear, unless you're going to come right out and say who the person is, I don't want to hear that that she's a woman is the requirement. I get really hung up on those things. So if I see that, I guess I would follow the boss on this one. If I saw Andrew Yang really pushing for him, I would trust that there is a reason that Andrew Yang is hitting the pavement for him, and I would get behind that.
Okay, so
But
now technically he has endorsed him, but you want to see Yang out there like working the circuit for him.
I want to see him at the DNC convention,
Yeah.
speaking to the people there and throwing his support behind Joe in that kind of manner.
Yeah.
And
Now,
that would get me up.
If there was ever an opening for Joe to find religion and support basic income, it would be right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
actually, everybody's talking about direct cash payments. I mean, might as well, Joe should just freaking support a pilot for a continuation of this. And
it makes no sense why
right?
they didn't. Like, it was the perfect opening. And it's like, why are you going to let it come out of Mitt Romney first?
Yeah, that's true. You know, Romney, frankly, as a fellow former Republican, Romney seems quite reasonable in this circus of
yes,
DC, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Kristen, I know we're running out of
Yes.
time, but I definitely wanted to thank you for coming on the show, for supporting the Nerds for Humanity channel, and also supporting the Long Island Yang Gang, and giving advice to folks who are thinking about starting 501c3s as well.
People can definitely reach out to me on Twitter or through one of these chats. You know, I am definitely accessible. I have the white math hat when you come across me posting for things.
What is your Twitter handle?
I am Yang Gang New York, NY.
Yang Gang NY. Like this?
No, I am in the front of it,
Oh.
you know, because that's the way you get around. I am Yang Gang New York.
At I am Yang Gang NY. Like, hold on one second. Like this?
Yes.
All right. Well,
Yes,
Kristen, I hope we'll have you back on Bruce Wayne, who also has an interesting name, says that you are a certified cutie. I hope you don't mind him saying that.
Thank
I think that came from a very nice place. It's from Batman, so you know he's a good guy. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. Stay healthy. I'm glad to hear that there is movement on the logistics front, because that would be one of the most concerning things about this virus stuff. But you know, hope your family stays healthy, and I look forward to having you back on and having more conversations.
Like I said, hopefully other people will join me in membership for Nerds for Humanity, and we can keep you going. And this will be a social place that we can hang out. And I'll talk to Bruce again.
Right on. Yeah, the more support we can get for the channel. My wife was saying, like, oh, if you grow this channel big enough, then you can just sort of interview like all kinds of people running for office. And, my view would be like, and I would have long conversations, but I would also keep it real and try and dig a few layers deeper, and try to do it in a you know, kind of thoughtful and positive way. But whenever I see interviews of candidates on like regular news, they're so bound by these tight time horizons. Stuffy. You know? And then it's just like, okay, well, they just gave their stump speech and then they left. So Mike's a great example where I feel like a lot of us got to know him now over the couple of interviews, and then Jermaine Johnson, I also feel like we've gotten to know him well as well. So you're
doing great things. You're doing great things.
Thank you. And I'm also going to let my wife know, because she's always like, how come you always spending so much time on the channel? But I'll let her know that people appreciate it, and I think she's coming around.
I totally do. And get more members, and create more tiers.
Great. Well, I love it. Thank you so much, Kristen. You want to say goodbye, nerds?
Goodbye, nerds.
Bye, nerds.